Regenerative Finance's presentation on a just transition to the next economy. In case, just making sure this is meeting. So I'm Andrew Meeker.
I am Jay Saber.
And then over there is Kate Poole, who's and we're 3 of 8 collective members across the country who are part of this Regenerative Finance project. What Regenerative Finance is really basically it's a project that's trying to organize capital out of extractive economies and move it into regenerative economies. And by doing so, try to create new models for financing and really prioritize communities that have been historically dispossessed of capital because of legacies of environmental extraction and the extraction of labor and like histories of racism and other forms of systematic oppression. So this workshop is to kind of give our foundational theory that we base our work on and talk a little bit about the work that we're doing and what we're looking forward to moving into in the near future.
So before we open up, we wanted to acknowledge the land that we're on and that this island of Manhattan was and is of the Lenape people for thousands of years, and that they lived here and they practiced all of their beliefs and all of their traditions and culture, and then in came the Dutch, and there's a mythical sale of Manhattan that took place, that it was purchased, but this concept of owning land was not something that the indigenous people here believed in or practiced, so they didn't understand this alleged exchange that was going through. The Dutch built a wall known for the street now down a couple of blocks, Wall Street, to keep out the English as well as the indigenous folks. And then when the English then took over New Amsterdam, changed its name to New York, and the Lenape people further were pushed away further and further with violence and with the threat of violence and with treaties that were not honored, pushed further and further west, all the way out to Oklahoma, some of them. And so we just want to honor all of their lives and the ongoing resistance of indigenous people who continue to live and practice their customs.
So the brief agenda for what we're going to try to rush through in the next 2 hours is talk about the just transition framework and talk about what we mean when we say just transition. Give some examples of people across the country that are actually starting to do this work. And so we're going to show videos. Some of them are a little old, but we would rather people be able to speak for themselves. And so we're going to show 3 videos of just 3 examples of some of our friends from across the country. We're going to talk about what we mean when we say non-extractive finance and our kind of particular recipe for that. And then what we're doing to look ahead. And we're going to get through all that really quickly so that we can spend some time in a discussion and to have some Q&A. So what this is, just to frame what we're talking about, regenerative finance occupies a particular niche, this really specific role in a much broader movement of this idea of a just transition. And a just transition it's transitional, it's not meant to be permanent. And so what our organization is a part of this much broader thing that's impermanent. It's going to end once we move away from this extractive economy that we're trying to get away from. And all of the stuff that we've learned and everything that we're going to present today, it's not new, it's stuff that we've learned from other people. This is just kind of our interpretation and articulation of it. and this is one iteration, but we owe so much of what we've learned from this to other people that have mentored us along the way. This particular presentation was really informed by Movement Generation, Justice and Ecology Project, which is a collective out in the Bay Area. And so this is an adaptation of their presentation, at least the first part, the Just Transition Framework. And so basically, if there's things that you like about this presentation, you can credit them. And if there's things that are confusing or you disagree with or find problematic, you can blame us, like solely. And that's just a good approach. And just like, yeah, all this exists. We're like standing on other people who've been doing this for years. And so we're just part of this long history. So what we're doing here is we're like storytelling. And we're trying to develop new cultures that can help transition us. And part of that storytelling process is, you know, what came up here is like, what do we mean when we say regenerative? What do we mean when we say just? Like, words have existed, but there's no inherent meaning to them. And in a lot of ways, a lot of words like investment and risk and interest have been taken by our economic system and corrupted and turned into something that could be destructive, but they had a meaning before they were corrupted by this economic system, the extractive economic system. And so what's helpful in our like storytelling and our like collective visioning for this new economy is for us to get on the same page about what we mean when we say these terms. And so like what we mean when we say just transition, regenerative, and we're gonna start out with like a really basic term is economy. So what does economy mean? What is economy?
Household.
Household?
The allocation of scarce resources.
The allocation of scarce resources. Anything else? Cool. So, yeah, so there's all sorts of, economy is something that's like always being talked about in the news. There's all sorts of associations with it. We think of like GDP and trading and goods and how we, like resources. And so getting down to this like fundamental level, what does economy mean? So we look at it as having the same prefix as ecosystem and ecology. And so all of these have the same word starting at the beginning of it. And what does that word mean?
Home.
What?
Home.
Home. So eco comes from the Greek word oikos, which means home. So ecology is the knowledge of home. It's like how we observe the interactions that happen where we live in order to understand and know about the home that we live in. Ecosystem is the system of relationships that make up home. You know, like the basic building block of an ecosystem is not the individual, it's the relationship. And it's made up of all these relationships between living things, but also between like water and plants. Everything has relationships in an ecosystem, and those are the building blocks, and together they create this ecosystem, the relationships of home. And economy is the management of home. How we manage where we live at its most like basic level. And so there's this relationship between these things, and in regenerative finance, we have an ecological approach to economy because we need to. Because we can't understand the economy unless we understand home. And home means a lot of different things depending on where you draw the boundaries. You know, like home can be your bedroom, it can be your neighborhood, it could be the city you live in, it could be your ecological region or your state or your country, it could be the planet. And so depending on where you draw the boundaries, it'll change how you define home. But you can't know home Like you can't know the economy or like be responsible and responsive unless you know your home. And so we need to like know ecology. We need to like, and we're not talking about this like scientific study. We're talking about popular ecology, like how we relate to where we live. And so we're trying to take an ecological approach to economy. And the problem right now in our world is if you draw the boundaries of the economy as being the entire planet, if you globalize home, if you globalize the economy, you're globalizing the ecosystem, you're globalizing home, and therefore you're globalizing the consequences of the economy. And so the economy inevitably has consequences. The economy is not good or bad, it just inevitably has consequences, it has an impact, but those consequences change depending on what economic activity is happening, and if we have a global economy and we have global consequences, we have globalized problems like climate change and the eradication or the erosion of biological diversity and the erosion of cultural diversity. So what we're hoping to do is by shifting the economy and relocalizing it to a home, to like a scale by which we can know and understand the impact of it, that we can like make those problems smaller and be able to like have a regenerative and restorative economy at space. What do we mean when we say a just transition? What comes to mind? Or like what is that referring to?
Reparations.
Reparations.
Fair
So we-
profit. Fair profit.
Fair profit. I mean,
We can talk about that.
for reparations, we need to right the wrongs that have happened. We need to like account for the damage that economy's done. And like fair, we're talking about like equity. Was there another thing? No?
Like the people in the communities who are most deeply affected by all the stuff that's wrong with the current system, being the ones coming up with the solutions for the just transition.
Yeah. So this is kind of at the basis of it, is that we're transitioning from one economy, from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy, but it must be just because there's lots of ways to do that, but there's lots of ways to do that leave people behind. You know, you can destroy the coal industry in eastern Kentucky and then build a solar industry in like the Bay Area of California, and it's changing, you know, where energy comes from, but it's not accounting for the people that live in eastern Kentucky that are out of a job because of the coal industry dying there. And so when we talk about a just transition, it means that we're going to forefront the people that have been most impacted by the extractive economy in building this next economy. So, we're transitioning from one thing to another, and so the economy we have, we're talking about an extractive economy. It's that's the basic logic of our current economy, is extraction. And so we, in this presentation, call it the banks and tanks economy. We started making up new laws that aren't real and basing our entire economy off of that. And it's like created a house of cards that is gonna end in collapse if we don't change it. It's like not sustainable. And so it's dig, burn, dump. So this economy is lubricated by finance. And so finance is taking all this economic activity and it's abstracting it into just these numbers that become kind of meaningless and become removed from what the actual economic activity is. And then it's trading them at a really rapid pace to make a lot of money and to really increase the pace of the extraction. And so there's only one form of governance that is possible in an economy based on extraction. What is that governance? The only form of governance that's possible is militarism. Why is that? If there's an economy that's based on extraction, why is militarism the only governance possible?
Because you're going to run out. You're
Run out
going to
what?
run out of resources to burn and dig and dump. So you got to keep going and you're going to come up against resistance.
Yeah.
In order to deal with it, you need to deal with it by eliminating that resistance.
So there's only like so long that people are going to be taken from over and over and over again. And so there's like things that, there's a culture that we can create that's about individualism and consumerism that fuels this sort of economy, but eventually people are going to resist. And people just like don't put up with that shit forever. And so there needs to be the constant threat of violence or actual violence ever present in order for the extractive economy to keep working.
Furthermore, the research technology, like the military, that they're all connected. You have the research that's put towards and the finances put towards the military, and you're able to develop technologies to burn and dig and dump things faster. So
It's like cycling, yeah. And so we need to move away from this and the logic of this sort of economy. And so we're moving towards a regenerative economy, and this is from Movement Generation. They call it a living, local, loving economy. And we're going to talk about what we mean by regenerative and regenerative finance, because we have a framing around that. And so we're moving from this to here. And how do we do that? So there's 6 strategies in the Just Transition framework. And we're kind of this one niche or component of those 6 strategies. So we need to organize to weaken and end the bad. So we need to like starve this beast. And there's different ways of doing that. And that's what like a lot of the movement building and political stuff that's happening is confrontational, and it's trying to end the bad. You know, there's a lot of political movements that are up against a lot of big systemic problems. And that's like a key component to this, but it can't be the only strategy. Something that Movement Generation says, what the hands do, the heart learns. And that if we are always fighting, that's all we'll know. And what do we have after we destroy that? So we're just like left with longing in our heart. And so we need to find ways to also build this as we're taking this step. We need to change the story. And this is talking about culture. We needed to develop a new culture that instead of one around consumerism and individualism, we need a culture around like a sacredness for life and sacredness for the planet and each other. We need to organize to change the rules. There's a lot of laws that are in place that are intended to keep this cycling and keep this going. And so we need to change those rules, and that can happen in a lot of different ways and a lot of different levels. That's one strategy. We have strength in democracy in the public sector. And this isn't necessarily like the government, but it's just things that are like collectively or commonly held. We need to work to build the new. We need to build new institutions that can replace the ones that these are trying to meet the needs of, but are doing so in a like violent way. And finally, kind of where we come in is we need to organize to move money and resources. And all of this requires like political movements. This is a movement building strategy. So it's all about like building political power. And that's the framing of this like brought together. They're like sub-strategies of that. So what we're trying to do at Regenerative Finance is kind of components of all of this, but really we're trying to move money and resources because there's a lot of wealth that's being held up in the extractive economy, and that like it's a bad idea to invest in an economy that's like bound to collapse. You know, it's a bad investment because it's not going to work. It's a bubble. It's like a house of cards, and it's wrong. And so there's all this dirty money, and that's being cycled through and through this economy. And so we talk about we need to launder it and get the dirty out and have it come out clean on the other side so we can use it for our purposes in the regenerative economy. And so,
What does that mean?
yeah. So, how does that look like? How do we launder money? We're still trying to figure it out, but kind of what we're going to talk about is our approach. There's this whole industry called like SRI, or socially responsible investing, and it's basically saying like we can keep doing what we're doing, but we can put up these filters that say like, oh, we're going to keep investing in the stock market, but we won't invest in tobacco, or we won't invest in military, or we won't invest in fossil fuels. And so there are these filters, and certain industries get caught up in them, but it's still cycling through the same economic logic. And so instead of having these like negative filters, we need to put positive filters and say what we mean when we like move money, like what is regenerative? What does it mean to move money to regenerative projects that's building the regenerative economy? And so we're kind of putting forth these positive filters or intentions around where the money, how the money, those resources need to be transformed. And in doing so, trying to create culture and trying to like transform capital so that we move it from like a monetary resource and it can be converted into like a land resource or community resource, food resources, and other types of like forms of capital. So we have our regenerative economic values that we use to kind of guide our work, and both is a guide for us of where we're trying to move capital, and it also is how we assess the success of it. It's like, instead of having interest back in the form of money, we have interest back in the form of the good it's doing. So Jay's going to talk about those.
Cool. And so you notice that there on our wall. So these are each of our core values. So would somebody please read number 1?
Builds community wealth.
So presently in our extractive economy, those who are accumulating wealth are often taking it from the communities that are doing a lot of work. And we believe that those people who are working should retain that wealth that they create in their own community. It shouldn't be taken out through this cycle. Number 2?
Shift economic control.
So in our present economy, the investors' rights and responsibilities come first, not the people and communities that are invested in. And so without concern for who is central in being valued in our economy, if it's an investor, it's going to further exploit those who are marginalized. And so we want those who have been most affected by this economy to be in control of their capital, to be in control of our economy. Number 3.
Democratizes the workplace.
So we really believe that people can participate in their lives and can shape their lives, and it's really exciting the ways in which people can cooperatively operate their workplaces. Number 4.
Drive social equity.
So this cycle really further entrenches a lot of social inequities, and what we believe in our vision of a regenerative economy, we're actually working for, as was said earlier, for reparations to make right for all of the wrongs that exist and are perpetuated by our present economy. Number 5.
Nobody wants to read that one. Wow. Advances regenerative ecological economics.
Yeah, so we want to be, of course, concerned for how our economy is relating to our ecology and resources. Number 6.
Relocalizes primary production and consumption.
Yeah, so we really believe that we should have an economy that is based in primarily relocalizing the way that people conduct the economy. Number 7.
Strengthens the public sector.
So I think here we're not meaning public sector to mean government, but public sector to mean the things that we can collectively share and use, and the things in commons that benefit us all. Number 8.
Builds movements and power.
So, as Andrew said, all of this is about building the social movements and power necessary to shift the center of gravity in our economy, to shift that center of gravity to be one that then actually cares for people and is actually regenerative and all of that. And we cannot get there justly without building that collective movement power to do all of that. And so we believe that economic work should be aligned and supported by and collaborative with movements for social justice. Number 9.
Retains culture and tradition, sorry.
Retains culture and tradition.
Yeah, so our present economy not only erodes our ecology, but also erodes the many cultural practices that people have. And we believe that people should be supported and their culture should be supported, and we can continue to see those as beautiful things, not things to destroy. Number 10.
Restores indigenous sovereignty and promotes decolonization.
So this is very much a value that we're still working on and learning on and wanting to see what we can do with, but as we started off in acknowledging the land that we're on, we need to recognize, and any economy here has to account for the ongoing acts of colonization on this land. And how can we actually work in our economy to build indigenous sovereignty? It feels absolutely critical to all that we're doing. And number 11.
Restores right relationship within ourselves and with our communities.
So really, this culture leads us a little bit like there's stuff that's lacking in our hearts that Andrew talked about. And we really think that we want to build an economy that makes us feel more full, that can help us heal from the harms that have been inflicted over the generations. So we just shared some values, and thank you so much for reading them. And you might be asking, like, well, okay, cool, like you have these ideas, but is anybody actually doing this? What could this look like? And at the beginning, somebody said, oh, a just transition means those communities who've been most impacted by this economy are actually driving the solutions in this new economy that is regenerative. So we're now going to take a shift to look at a few videos of some folks who are doing precisely that. Cero is a waste management cooperative that started, and they worked to start a compost cooperative for Boston. At the same time as doing that, they're working to shift and change policy that required all of the restaurants who are disposing of waste not to put their organics into the conventional waste stream. And so by shifting that policy, they were affecting a change that created that market for them to be able to practice.
Word came out about this new opportunity they called the green economy. A light bulb went off in my head when it said that this was an opportunity where people could create businesses and jobs for themselves.
My name is Stephen Evans.
Soy Josefina Luna.
Soy Evelyn Fuentes.
Laura Holmes.
Guadalupe González.
Timothy Hall.
And I'm a worker owner.
Trabajadora y dueña.
Worker owner.
Dueña y trabajadora.
And I'm a worker owner at Cero.
Cero is a full-service, source separation, recycling, reduction, and organic composting business serving restaurants in Roxbury, Dorchester, and East Boston. A group of folks who are from those communities came together, wanted to create jobs for themselves, and wanted to have a cooperative business that adhered to this triple bottom line: planet, people, and profits.
Cero was the answer. Workers from unemployed and underemployed backgrounds coming together on their own initiative to form an enterprise, that respects their individuality, their needs, respects their labor, and also does this great service to the community by helping to drive recycling up.
In 2014, there's going to be an organic waste ban where all the restaurants, commercial businesses have to start composting the organic waste. And so there's a huge opportunity to have a business that can take advantage of this new market.
Por cada libra de comida que se sirve en un restaurante, hay media libra que es basura. Cuando nosotros vamos a recoger los desechos de comida de los restaurantes, nosotros vamos a hacer abono. Entonces nosotros eso lo vamos a llevar a la farm y eso va a producir los nuevos alimentos, los vegetales, las frutas, y ese es el alimento que va a volver a nuestras mesas.
Well, what speaks to me is we pay a lot of money for our trash pickup here. So I think being a one-stop pickup point, the one-stop recycling plus the compost plus the trash is unique.
When I was first hearing the term about cooperatives, it was the same term that they use about the green economy, green pathways out of poverty.
Ya no vamos a estar dependiendo de esas grandes compañías que solo que solo quieren lucrarse de nuestro trabajo.
And it's really good because it's the first co-op between low-income Afro-Americans and low-income Latinos working together.
So we have all this melting pot of people, but if we could just blend together and work together, that becomes a great political power and a great financial power.
Vamos a subsistir nosotros mismos y va a quedar en la misma comunidad. Uno mismo gana el dinero y lo distribuye o lo gasta aquí mismo.
Cero is an opportunity to show that we're stepping up and we're at the table.
We're interested in changing how restaurant recycling and disposal gets done, but also in changing how local investment gets done. So this campaign is to raise the seed money to create the structure for local investment. Local people are going to be able to become equity investors in Cero Co-op and help buy the machinery and equipment to run the business.
The way that Cero is trying to create local investment vehicles for local individuals as a way of financing their company is great for me, and I want to be a part of them being tremendously successful because I really do want to see this proliferate, and I think it's part of a vision for a just and sustainable future that we have to start acting toward as well as thinking toward.
For our people, water is central to our spirituality, our culture. A lot of our towns or our communities are named after water.
Under Black Mesa is the Navajo Aquifer, so it's the sole source of drinking water in this whole region. It's prehistoric water. You can take it right from a stream and it's better and cleaner and healthier for you than bottled water.
When a spring isn't replenishing, it really has an impact on our spirituality and our way of life. A lot of our work for Black Mesa Water Coalition has been about how we protect our aquifer from companies like Peabody Coal Company. They still use about 1,400 acre-feet of water for their mining operations. We started to see the physical impacts. Springs were drying up.
Peabody was using Navajo's water for coal mining, which fed the generating station. It's called the Navajo Generating Station. It's on Navajo land. People assume that we own it, but we don't own it.
There's really not a lot of economic opportunities, especially where our world is at today. If we really want to continue to live in our communities, at some point we have to show that it is possible. That's why just transition is important.
We are not about shutting down the mine, shutting down the plant, and losing all of these jobs. A just transition to me means we're intentional about ending the fossil fuel economy in a way that builds up an alternative economy that benefits our people.
We can transition. We can do it ourselves.
We're here at the Our Power Camp that we've hosted along with the Climate Justice Alliance.
We're here to come up with strategies to deal with the coal industry kind of across the whole sector.
We're going to be focused on 3 communities. We call it hotspots. Black Mesa here is the region that we've picked as one hotspot. The next gathering is going to be in Richmond, where they're dealing with oil refineries, and then in Detroit and other areas where they've been dealing with energy empires.
We have a strong focus on how can we bring in our Navajo people into the work that we're doing, and how can we get support from non-Navajo communities and organizations.
There's a lot of representation here at this gathering from Appalachia, Alaska, Powder River Basin, Black Mesa, Oakland, Detroit, Phoenix, Tucson. A lot of our communities are dealing with these extractive industries in our backyard, whether it's fracking, natural gas, coal development, coal mining, coal-fired power plants, oil refineries. We are dealing with the same corporations. We are dealing with the same policies, the energy policies.
We're all on the same page, but coming from a different location, different environment. The coal seems to be the main factor.
The company that destroyed my family history is basically the child of the company that is destroying their way of life out here.
Even though Michigan is not a producer of coal, we're a recipient of it, and our communities are still suffering as a result of the burning of the coal. So we're part of this coal family, so to speak.
In the Bay Area, we think we have a lot to learn from coal-impacted communities, being refinery-impacted communities.
If we come together, that just amplifies the message that just transition is so important for all of us.
We're going to need each other in developing strategies to make this economic transition real and to make it happen in the way that really truly benefits communities that are most impacted.
Green power! Green power!
If gatherings like this and other conversations can bring us to the point where we can combine forces, then we can win.
The Navajo Generating Station powers the 300-mile canal from Lake Havasu area to Phoenix and Tucson. It's called the Central Arizona Project. They call it CAP. What our solution is that we can power CAP with solar.
All the lands on Black Mesa who have already gone through mining and are in various stages of reclamation and can't be used for anything else, can't we put solar on those areas? There's existing transmission lines, there's existing infrastructure. And can we as Navajo people be owners of that? As the Climate Justice Alliance, we made a decision that whenever we get together, we have to throw down for what community that we're in. So what we want to do is we want to have a big action to educate people about what resources are being taken from here, what are the costs of this lifestyle that they live in southern Arizona. Also to push forward our idea that to move water through the cap to power the Southwest, it can be done with solar.
We're going to take a solar panel, a nice big one, and we're going to take our water barrels, and we're going to take our water pumps, and we're going to start pumping it back into our barrels using solar.
Something that was reinforced for me was that we don't have to just let things happen to us, and we have support from all over the country, and there's many communities that are just like us. We can work together.
The just transition to me looks like our communities having the ability to decide what kind of economy we want.
A transition toward a system that values human life,
where people can live healthy and safe.
There's a way that we can have well-being and thriving communities with meaningful work.
There are other ways to generate this electricity cleaner, safer, and more sustainably.
I think Arizonans would be happy with getting their electricity and their water from renewable energy. There can be power without pollution and energy without injustice.
The time is now. We're at a crossroads and continue on this business as usual path, or we can create solutions for our future generations.
really excited that a few months ago, Regenerative Finance got to support our first project, which was the Renaissance Community Cooperative in Greensboro, North Carolina. This neighborhood has been without a grocery store for nearly 2 decades. The community members kept looking for a grocery store to come into their community, and when that did not happen, they realized we have the power collectively to create it ourselves. So they have risen up and done just that. And we'll talk about the specifics of what that will look like after we see them talk about their grocery store.
I want a grocery store.
I want a grocery store.
I want a grocery store in my neighborhood.
In my neighborhood. A place where community, health, and wealth
grow with every purchase.
We want a grocery store that we own.
We
own along with our neighbors.
I need to be able to walk to my store.
I want a store I could walk to.
I want a store that offers good jobs.
And a living wage.
Something that we could call our own. Something that we could be proud of.
We want a co-op.
We want a co-op. We want a co-op
where the employees look forward to going to work.
I want a grocery store that doesn't pick up and leave,
but that is given back to me as I'm giving to it.
So we can decide what is sold in our neighborhood.
I want a grocery store
where the profits go back into our community.
I want a co-op that helps us raise healthy children.
That keeps my daddy healthy.
We want a store that sells food. Food.
I want vegetables.
I want vegetables.
I want ice cream.
I also want ice cream.
I love me some ice cream.
But this is something that we can own a part of. Don't you want to join us? I hope you do. And you can also say it's my store. Make it personal. Make it all about you. You can walk in with your head held high. You can walk in knowing that I've played part in this, that this is a legacy I can leave behind for my children. This is something that I can tell them forever, that we have put our mark here, that we have made this happen.
Oh yeah.
The RCC is coming.
The RCC is coming.
The RCC is coming.
The RCC is coming.
The Renaissance Community Co-op is coming.
Our grocery store.
Reason why other big commercial grocery stores didn't set up shop in Northeast Greensboro, because they came again and again and did market analysis, and they saw that they would be profitable but not profitable enough for it to make sense. And that's again the logic of the extractive economy is because it's a mostly poor, mostly black community, they couldn't attract a grocery store. And so our economy doesn't meet people's needs. That's what's evident there. And this community also is able to do this because they've been doing political organizing for many years. They stopped a landfill from coming into their neighborhood. They stopped a detention center from coming into their neighborhood. And so they had been building political power, and they're actually able to basically shift the political structure of the city of Greensboro in North Carolina as a result of all the organizing that they've been doing. And so they were already had both relationships and the political power to do this. And so something that might have came up for me in watching these videos is this in a lot of ways looks a lot like our current economy. It's still businesses, and things that movement generation talks about is there's two things about contradictions. And the first is contradictions are inevitable, but hypocrisy is intolerable. And so we need to be clear about and the second thing is that transition is the process of navigating those contradictions. And so when we're moving from one thing to another, there's going to be contradictions because the world's been set up in a way that's against us. And so we're going to be confronted with those things, and because they're inevitable, it doesn't mean that we can just be okay with them, but we have to navigate through them. And so part of this just transition process is navigating through this and figure out how to use tools like finance or capital, which is just a tool. There's no inherent value judgment in it. But right now, people serve capital, and we need to flip that around so that capital serves people, and we need to put it in collectively held, cooperatively held commons. And so there's a baseline assumption of extraction here, and we need to move away from that logic. And that's it could look the same, but there's some baseline fundamental things that are different about it. So I'm going to talk really quickly about what non-extractive finance is, and so we can move into the Q&A, I think, or talk about our projects and then the Q&A. So what we're trying to do with Regenerative Finance is create new models for financing that push the edge of what financing currently is available. And so there's certain laws or logic about finance that keep us in this cycle, and we're trying to say that there's nothing inherent about that and that we can break those rules. So there's kind of three main rules. Like when you think of finance or like a loan, what's an expectation around it? Or an investment? A return. A return. So we're going to say conventional or dominant. It's not traditional, that's for sure. So one is a return. So when you think of investment, you put money into something with the expectation that more money is going to come out. There's an expectation, but that money comes from somewhere. And it either comes from, it comes from somewhere. And so it needs to be extracted in order to be returned to the investor. And so like interest, or like compounding interest, is necessarily extractive. It works to be a tax on poverty and a reward for wealth. Because the wealthier you are, the more you're able to leverage your capital to make more money, and the poorer you are, the more expensive it is to access that capital. And so it always drives inequality. And so we just say that financing should be zero interest. You shouldn't be able to make money off of your money. Your money shouldn't grow money because it's necessarily extractive and it's taking from other people's labor and work. And the first rule of ecological restoration is the restoration of our labor. And so in order to be right with our home, in order to be right with our planet, we have to be able to control our labor and not have the wealth that's created go to capital, go to the owners of capital. What's another logic of finance?
That gives clarity on that. So that in this model, that means that any investor, anyone who brings money to the table is never allowed to get any financial return on that investment.
I mean, the baseline is that people shouldn't grow their money off of their money. And so there's like ways that people talk about non-extractive investing that accounts for, inflation. It accounts for like administrative costs or like risk mitigation. And there's all these kind of like technical things that might like bump it up like a % or two. But the baseline logic is that your money shouldn't grow more money because it's extractive. So two, if I give you a loan for your car and someone asks, and like, what do...
Collateral.
Yeah, thanks. How do you spell collateral? Where? So in order to get access to financing, you already have to have capital, you already have to have wealth, and you have to risk losing that wealth in order to get access to it. And so poor communities who have to put up collateral risk being further dispossessed. And financing shouldn't further dispossess the people that we're moving money to. People shouldn't be worse off than when they started. And so non-extractive financing is non-collateralized. And instead, there's a shared interest in that if I give a loan to Jay, I have an interest in Jay succeeding, or in order for it not to fail. And so instead of just being insured by something I'm going to steal from Jay later down the line if it fails, I just want to see Jay succeed so that we're all better off. And then the third logic is that financing either through, there's two things, is loan has immediate payback. And so if I give Shelly a loan, the very next year he's supposed to start paying that money back, but a lot of the time businesses don't become productive in the first year or 2 or 3. And so it's an unreasonable expectation to expect someone to pay money back before what it's invested in becomes productive. And so instead we say that there's no debt obligation until productive. And so basically people, what was I going to say? It's a different logic that it's like profit sharing, and that you only owe money once you have surplus. You only share it once you have surplus. But if you don't have surplus, then you're not obligated to share it. So sorry, this is messy. This is the like kind of logic of non-extractive financing. A lot of this we kind of borrowed or adapted from an organization called the Working World. Gislan is here representing the Working World and can answer a lot more questions about how they work. And so this is what the loan we gave, a collective loan we gave to the Renaissance Community Cooperative to help them get started, and that they were able to leverage to get access and like basically to get off the ground, was according to these principles, or these ones, not these ones. And another cool component about it was that there were royalty payments that came out of it, and instead of going back to the investor, as long as they're productive and until the loans get paid back, they go into a pooled fund that will be like a revolving loan fund that will be community controlled, so it's building local wealth, and that way like money's not being extracted, but that stays in the community. It's democratically held and democratically controlled as financial commons. And so what that financial commons looks like, is are we talking about the financial cooperative? Okay, so that financial commons is called the Southern Reparations. Southern Reparations Loan Fund. Southern Reparations Loan Fund, and so it's a cooperatively held loan fund in the South, and it's working to repair the damages of like legacies of racism and of extraction that have happened across the South. And so our loan to the RCC is going to feed into the Southern Reparations Loan Fund. The Southern Reparations Loan Fund is a cooperative, and it's also part of this larger cooperative called the Financial Cooperative that's in development, that we're working with, that's also housed at the Working World. And the Financial Cooperative is, so like a big question is, it's great, there's all these little projects across the country that are, you know, doing new stuff and creating these new models, but it's pretty small. And so what does it look like to scale this up? And so that's kind of what the Financial Cooperative is answering is, if we create a cooperative of all these people that are doing this kind of work nationally, then we can leverage way more access to capital and put it in like more widely held democratic control as the commons, these financial commons. And so there's going to be localized loan funds that are being in development all across the country. The Southern Reparations Loan Fund is probably one of the more advanced ones, like is one of the more established ones, but it's in development even. But there's ones that are popping up in Richmond, California. I mean, here in New York, the working world has been running for over a decade. And I mean, there's communities across the country that are starting these loan funds that would be able to take this financial commons, and be able to disperse it locally in their community. But they're all members of this national cooperative.
Yeah, and so the financial cooperative and building out the Southern Reparations Loan Fund, we're also really excited that that's really one of the next projects that we're taking on. We're trying to get people to move in other like collective investment too, although the Renaissance Community Co-op is also a part of that. And we're thinking also like, oh, well, this is the South, and this is the North though, and like what is the responsibility of New Yorkers to think about reparations or any of those questions? And interestingly, like there's a lot of reasons. Like actually, people were enslaved here on this land. At one time, over 40% of whites in this city did actually enslave somebody and hold a slave. The second largest slave market in our entire country happened just down the street on Wall Street between Water and Pearl. Because of people pushing actually from efforts through Occupy, there's now a marker on the northeast corner of Water Street and Wall Street, which acknowledges that there was a slave market there, which was created to systematize the way that human beings were traded so that they could be more regulated, they wouldn't be walking the streets and causing slave rebellions. Interestingly, they refused, people who were enslaved refused to simply give up their humanity, and actually after the market was created just a few months later led a massive uprising, which was really, really powerful. And so we recognize that that financial system that has developed just down the street and permeated our entire globe has benefited historically from that practice.